welcome to this particular lecture. This lecture is focused on MEMS simulation using COMSOL multiphysics. Now, you see why you need to learn a simulation, right, for this particular course. We have seen a fabrication of sensor, right, but there are a lot of questions that we need to address before we fabricate the sensor, and simulation will help us to answer those questions. So, some of the questions can be if you have the experimental data, right, and you need to understand or verify those data, then you can use this particular simulation software. Second can be if experimental data are given and the conditions are not available, I can use the simulation to predict the behavior, while the third can be if I devise a methodology to calculate the quantities of interest to understand or explain a phenomenon, then you can use the simulations. So, if I see why exactly simulation is required, then these are the three answers to the question that we can design or simulate the device if the given data is, if you have given data set of data. Second one is to understand how device will perform if you fabricate using the conditions that you have determined, right. And the third one is to understand the methodology is correct or not, right. So, these three things are there. Before we go to this particular thing, let us see what we will be talking in this particular lecture. We will be understanding why we require simulation, which we have just seen three different reasons. Introduction to modeling in COMSOL multiphysics, and then we will see few of the examples of MEMS based modeling with COMSOL multiphysics. We will talk about piezoelectric devices, we will talk about piezoresistive devices, we will talk about electromechanical and thermal actuators, we will also talk about fluid structure interactions, and then we will actually see the demo on thermal actuator, following by some question answers. If you have, you can always ask us on the forum. So, let us move to the this particular slide. Now, for example, if I have the experimental data, then how can I explain or verify? So, if you want to compare, so for example, you can do the measurement and simulation. For example, ETM thermal analysis of high power light emitting diodes, you can do a comparison with whatever data you have obtained with the simulations. Second one is when you understand the nanostructures, the stress in the nanostructure, if you want to predict that how much would be the stress on applying a certain amount of force, then you can understand or use the simulation. Finally, if a transmission line is divided into 5 sections, you can understand whether your methodology or quantity of interest to understand particular phenomenon is correct or not, your methodology to design the device is correct or not. So, for that you require simulations. So, when you talk about COMSOL multiphysics, we will be discussing the details in one of the class about how to use this software, but for you to understand what are the applications and where you can use this particular software. The first one is in fluid dynamics. You can use to understand the microfluidic system and the fluid flowing through the particular channel. You can use in electromagnetics. You can use in heat. We just if you take an example of a heater, you can easily understand. In structural thing, for example, if there is a cantilever and you want to know the stress and strain in the cantilever, in terms of chemicals, what chemicals you can use is in that particular software. In terms of acoustic sensor, if you want to understand whether the acoustic sensor that you have designed, suppose a diaphragm, whether it will work correctly or not, to verify your equations for optimization as well as for integrating the MATLAB and Excel and CAD, right. So, this is the advantage of COMSOL multiphysics. Of course, you can do multiphysics with applications. For example, you can have the model and then you can use the interface to finally generate the reports. So, like I said, we will be discussing on piezoelectric devices. Let me just go quickly through the piezoelectric devices, and then in the experimental class we will see in detail how these piezoelectric devices can be used with the given COMSOL multiphysics software. Now, when you talk about piezoelectric effect, this is the electromechanical interaction between the mechanical state and the electrical state in crystalline materials. You know that when I apply a pressure on a piezoelectric material, there is a change in the voltage. Right. There can be many applications to piezoelectric material. For example, it can be used as actuator for understanding the displacement in terms of acoustic transducer. It can be used for the displacement applied when it sensor, measurement of devices and sensing. A lot of applications are there for piezoelectric material. It can also be used as an energy harvester, and we will be looking at the tutorial on how to analyze a simple cantilever based piezoelectric energy harvester. Then we will also see surface acoustic wave gas sensor. So, in which the tutorial will be analyzing the eigen frequencies of a surface acoustic wave, that is SAW gas sensor, and in particular we will see the effect of additional mass load from the absorbed gas. So, for a given material, when the gas is absorbed, there will be change in the mass, and this mass lowers the resonant frequency. So, suppose I design a cantilever, let us say this is a silicon wafer and I have a cantilever, alright. Then this cantilever will vibrate at a particular frequency, and if I have a sensing material on the cantilever, when there are gas molecules like loaded in this cantilever or onto the cantilever, absorbed in the cantilever, the frequency, the resonance frequency would be different. That resonance frequency we can understand the, or we can simulate it with the help of the COMSOL multiphysics. We can also design and simulate bulk acoustic wave resonators, which are useful components for many RF applications, alright. In particularly when they can operate as a narrowband filters. We will discuss this thing in detail. We will also understand the piezoelectric shear actuated beam, and in this tutorial particularly a static analysis of composite cantilever beam equipped with a piezo ceramic actuator will be taught. Then we will see piezoresistive devices. Now, the difference between piezoelectric and piezoresistive is that in piezoresistive devices, when we apply a pressure, there is a change in resistance, where in case of piezoelectric, on the same thing, when we apply a pressure or force, then there is change in the voltage, electrical signal. So, the example of piezoelectric devices are silicon, polysilicon, germanium, while the applications are that the change in the conductivity due to strain can be measured to use the used to sense things such as acceleration and pressure. There are a lot of other applications in terms of biomedical domain, lot of applications in terms of electronics domain. If you know the use of COMSOL, it can make your life easier. Okay. Now, if I have a diaphragm, right, and I want to understand if I apply a force, what is the change in the diaphragm. For example, piezoresistive pressure sensor. If I have, let us say this is the silicon wafer and I design my sensor, my sensor is here, okay, on this one, and I am applying a pressure or force on this particular chip. Now, we understand if I draw a cross section, the cross section is like this and the sensor is here, okay, and the edge. If I this is my sensor, okay, and this is a contact to the sensor, right, this is a contact, this is my piezoresistive sensor, this is silicon wafer, this is a diaphragm. If I apply a force on this particular diaphragm, then this diaphragm displacement and that diaphragm displacement causing the change in the piezoresistor can be simulated with the help of COMSOL multiphysics. You see, so this is nothing but a pressure sensor. If I apply a pressure and if I see the change in resistance is nothing but I can design my pressure sensor with the help of piezoresistive material, right. So, that is the advantage of using the simulation software, we will again see in detail in the TA class. While we will also understand the capacitive pressure sensor, the bias resonator as well as the thermal actuator in detail in the following lecture. How the capacitive pressure sensor would be used, and how to set up a coupled structural electrical problem using important features of MEMS module such as electromechanics, thermal stresses, terminal boundary conditions. This everything we can design with the help of this particular simulation software. We will also see how the bias resonator can be used, and how the pull in voltage, bias frequency domain response occurs, and we will also understand the micro machine accelerometer, how we can design or simulate micro machine accelerometer, and the example for this particular thing is based on the case study from the book Microsystem Design by Stephen. While we will also design the thermal actuator in which we will take an example of a two hot arm thermal actuator, and that will couple with a 3 different physics phenomenon such as electric current conduction, heat conduction, and with heat generation. Okay. So, along with structural stresses and other things. Same way, if you want to understand the design of the microfluidics, you can also use the COMSOL multiphysics in detail, where you understand the fluid structure interaction from the when the fluid is flowing in this particular in microfluidic channel. Alright, and same thing we will understand how exactly the micropump mechanism would be used. We will say that this particular example we will see how to model the fluid structure interaction, which is FSI using MEMS module. We can understand viscous forces and the system pressure imposes forces to the surface of a structure. Also we will say the deformation in the soft structure, which is not really small, is not small, and the fluid regime will therefore change. This means that the change in structure and fluid dynamics are coupled. This why we can say that this changes in structure and fluid dynamics are coupled, we will discuss in detail. We will understand a demo of a thermal actuator and how we can design this particular actuator, and then we will end up the TA class on that particular lecture note. So, the idea of showing you the COMSOL multiphysics and to take a lot of application is to help you that before you go for fabrication, suppose you take the help of INUP in sense that we have in IISc, and if you go to that particular program, if you want to fabricate a device, before you do the fabrication, if you have finished the simulation, it will be easier for you to design the process flow accordingly. Right. Thus, understanding simulation using multiphysics, COMSOL multiphysics can help you out to reduce the cost in a way, because you know the performance or you have simulated the device performance, and when you fabricate a device you can compare that performance with the fabricated one. Right. So, having said that, let us see in the experimental class how this simulation can be used. Till then I will end up this particular introduction to COMSOL multiphysics here, and learn this as an example, so that you can design lot of sensors and transducers before you fabricate the device. Right. Again we have a fab lab right over here, but it is always advisable to use simulation to get the results and then to move for the fabrication. Alright. So, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Till then, you take care, and I will see you sometime later. Right. Bye.